of when we communicate with other people, how we feel and how they feel. And, it's difficult, it's challenging, but I don't know. I think most of us have faced some fairly big challenges, and some of us enormous challenges that we've prevailed with. And so I'm hopeful, but I think it does take persistence.
Just keep trying.
Yeah.
Marshall Gantz.
Yeah, it was interesting because I'd interviewed a number of people who were saying things like, Karen Armstrong said to me, "We need to speak out against injustice, but not in a way that causes more hatred. Remember what St. Paul said, charity takes no delight in the wrongdoing of others." And then Jason Stanley said to me, one of the things that can help, Jim, is if you remember that you too could unknowingly be under the influence of bias. And so I was starting to kind of think, like this, we need to find common ground. And a lot of other people had said very similar things. And I'm watching Bill Moyers, and on comes Marshall Gantz, who was a major chapter, probably the biggest chapter in my book. He's a public narrative guru. And this guy teaches at Harvard, and he was a union organizer for 25 years for Cesar Chavez. Before that, he was with Martin Luther King. And he's a real guru in the area of change management and public narrative. And so he says to Bill Moyers, "I have no time for these people who think that there's too much polarization in the world. The lack of polarization is what you get in a dictatorship. In democracy, we want more polarization, not less polarization." And I thought, what the hell? There goes like part of the thesis of my book, right? So I phoned him and I said, "Okay, I'm totally confused." And he said, "Jim, you need to learn about Rabbi Hillel." And I said, who's Rabbi Hillel? And he said, well, he was alive at the time of Jesus, but he didn't have as good a marketing team, so most people don't know about him, but he's a great Jewish rabbi. And I'll send you some stuff. So he sent me this stuff about Rabbi Hillel. So I started reading Rabbi Hillel. So Rabbi Hillel is a very interesting man. And he said there's two types of arguments. There's argument for the sake of heaven, and then there's this other kind of argument that's designed to demolish and steamroll and destroy your opponent, to beat your opponent. And one of them is good. Argument for the sake of heaven helps you get to the truth of a matter. Argument for the sake of defeating your opponent, not so good. And so there's good polarization and there's bad polarization. And so it seems to me, a lot of the lessons that I learned, when I think about the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh, Karen Armstrong, so many of these other people, whether they're academics or spiritual leaders, really had to do with this kind of respectful intention that you bring to disagreeing with other people. When you really, really care deeply about something, do you have the capacity to actually disagree with someone in a way that isn't designed to shut them up and to push them out of the conversation? Or how do you actually bring them into the conversation?
Yeah, how do you not make people right or wrong? How do you allow the spaciousness for that conversation?
That's right.
Yeah.
Especially when it's something that is a real, what I mean, something you really care about and it's a big deal. That takes skills that, I need to work on, and I think most of us do. And I think that was one of the big lessons for me. And I think that a big part of it, because I'm a communications person, is in our ability to be able to tell stories that are more inclusive, that are more moving, that have more emotional and values content in them, and less about facts. And so it seems to me that, after writing this book, I was surprised to learn that what I do in the communications business is kind of right at the center of this whole problem of not doing anything about climate change.
I have 2 of your books. How many are there? 3?
3, yeah.
And is there one in the works?
Yeah, I'm doing another one on storytelling. We know that stories are the way we see the world, but most people don't know how to tell stories, and so I'm working on that. And it involves a lot of the interviews that I did that didn't make it into I'm Right and You're an Idiot.
It's interesting to hear you talk about some of the people you've interviewed, like Karen Armstrong, which I hadn't expected. And so many others. It almost seems like you're working on your PhD or a thesis, or you're a student. Yeah,
in fact, that's what I think, when I look back on my life as a professional communications person, I think one of the gifts that I had was I'm really curious and I love learning. And it's funny because I feel like everything that I've been learning over the last while should have been something I did in my early 20s, because I've learned so much about human communications. And I'm so grateful to people like Karen Armstrong.
We've wandered through a lot of different areas, down a few different paths. And in the last remaining minutes of this conversation, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience? Any sage wisdom and advice?
We were talking about despair, and there's a lot of emotions like despair, like I can't make a difference, why bother, that are paralyzing. And then there are other emotions that get us off the couch. Unfortunately, one of the most powerful of those is anger. And a lot of the time, what I've seen is that along with anger, you can have despair. You can have this sort of despair, and it's almost like a battle. And I think one of the things that we need to be able to do is bring hope into the conversation. And not fake hope, not like flowers in May kind of stuff, but believable hope. And I think that lies in what we stand for, as opposed to, you can be hopeful and you can feel empowered and strong and feel like you're able to have more influence and feel and free yourself of despair without actually feeling unrealistic. You think about climate change. It's such a huge problem. The more you learn about it, the more it
becomes overwhelming.
It's it's maybe not depressing, but it leads you to despair. So how do you deal with that? And I think we need to be able to take care of ourselves and live sort of a healthy lifestyle so that we can deal with despair and replace it with hope. And hopefulness can actually replace despair.
I really want to thank you for taking the time to come by. It's been a real pleasure, real honor to get to meet you and share your books.
Thank you.
And hopefully you're going to sign them.
Absolutely.
Okay. We've been speaking with Jim Hoggan, who's a public relations advisor, a past chair of the David Suzuki Foundation, founder of the website Desmog Blog, author of 3 books. 4th is on the way. And the most recent, I'm Right and You're an Idiot, which is a fabulous book. I loved it. I really want to thank you for coming by. That's another edition of the Conversation Lab. This radio program and podcast is produced by CFRO-FM in Vancouver's downtown east side. We're on the territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Our gratitude and thanks to them, as well as to the many not-for-profit organizations, community groups, and change makers around the world that support this program. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider becoming a member of Co-op Radio to support this program and the many others produced by hundreds of volunteers. If you have a story to share or know someone who does, please have them contact us at coopradio.org, theconversationlab.ca, and on many social media and podcasting platforms. This episode was cobbled together with some help from Brian McKinnon, Kimit Sekon, John Massacar, and Julian Anton. Thanks, guys, and thank you for listening. I'm Don Schaefer.